What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the watch list ahead of Game Week 15. So obviously there's only 2 games so far by the time this video goes up anyway. 2 games so far gone from Game Week 14, which is Leeds versus Palace and Newcastle versus Norwich. So I don't want to do too many kind of transfer tips, team selection videos right now because we need to see more of the games first before I start making those decisions. But with a watch list, at least it's kind of a good look at players and maybe looking out for Game Week 15, 16 and beyond. And also it's kind of nice to get it out before the players have played so it doesn't look completely knee-jerk. So that's the reason Watchlist is coming out today. The rest of the videos will be out over Thursday and Friday when we've had a few more games, and obviously deadline stream on Saturday as well, and a bit more of a return to normal for next week at least. So if you enjoy it, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and let's jump into it. We'll start off with Romelu Lukaku. Now again, obviously recording this earlier, I don't even know if he's going to start against Watford. I would hope that he would, or he'd at least get some minutes, and therefore going forward I expect him to start quite regularly when he's back fully fit, although Tuchel obviously over Watford, maybe West Ham away in Game Week 15 may kind of bed him into the team a little bit slowly, and then from kind of Leeds onward, hopefully you'd be looking at some regular starts. Now this obviously, as always, the watch list is based around my team, right? So this is my current team. Any player that I already own is of course not going to be on the watch list because I already own them, but I do have a Kane shaped hole. Ignore the captaincy for now, that might change by Game Week 15 deadline, but I've got Kane, and I keep talking about how I'm going to get rid of him probably in Game Week 16 or 17. That was kind of always the plan once I brought him in. And I don't really necessarily want to stick around to that kind of price point. But Lukaku is that little bit cheaper, where I know it's only like 0.7, 0.8 million, but that could make quite a big difference to what I can do with the team. And also Chelsea have some pretty good fixtures. Lukaku's fairly nailed. I think Leeds at home, Everton at home is pretty good. I think Aston Villa away could still be decent as well. I know Gerrard's kind of tightened Villa up a little bit, but let's see over the next couple of games how well that can keep going, especially against some of the tougher teams. And Brighton at home's not too bad either. And I think Lukaku's underlying numbers, 0.45 expected goals, 0.28 expected assists, are pretty good, right? It's pretty decent. The only downside is he doesn't have penalties. And when you're paying 11.5 million for a player that doesn't have penalties, it's a little bit of a hard sell. And also, the other thing that I would ask myself when I maybe bring him in is, which of these fixtures would I captain him in? And again, we've got the same problem as with Ronaldo, as with Son, as with Kane. Salah's pretty much going to be the captain right up until the point that he leaves. And to be honest, right now, I'm not quite sure when that's going to be, because African Cup of Nations kind of players are going to start going over right near the end of December. But there's lots of rumours that players from the Premier League, like Liverpool, etc., might get to go a little bit later. So if Salah gets to play all the way up until Game Week 20, or maybe even Game Week 21, which is when he plays Chelsea away, 2nd of January. I'm not quite sure exactly when he's going to go, but he could play, let's say he plays right up until Game Week 20. Well, you look at those fixtures, and which ones am I going to captain Lukaku in over Salah? And again, I come back to that point of, should we just be spreading the money around, going for cheaper forwards, putting some more money into midfield, keeping the money into defence, etc. So I do like Lukaku as a little bit of a differential, and I could see him possibly outscoring Kane over those fixtures, or at least kind of nearly matching him and having a little bit more money to spend elsewhere. So he is on the watch list. I want to see how he does against Watford. I mean, obviously, if he doesn't start, then I wouldn't be massively confident about returns against West Ham away. But this is the watch list for the future. So Game Week 16, which is the week when, if I'm going to sell Kane, it's that week, or Game Week 17. Lukaku has some pretty good fixtures, so I'm definitely going to look at him. It just depends on whether I can get the team that I want with him in the team, and that's only going to be seen in a couple of weeks. Okay, so Gabriel Jesus is someone that I've spoken about quite a bit. I mean, realistically, what this boils down to is I really want to get a Man City attacker, because those fixtures are so good, right? Watford away, Wolves at home, Leeds at home, Newcastle away, and Brentford away. And Leicester at home is not even that bad of a fixture either. So the next 6 are pretty decent. The only question is, how many of those games is he going to play? And I mentioned on a video recently that he hasn't actually been benched that much. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to start all these games over Christmas. And obviously, if De Bruyne, Foden, Grealish get fit, then suddenly there's a bunch more players to fit into the team, and he might start missing a few games. But he's only missed Everton and Burnley since Game Week 2. Now, Aston Villa away, I don't know if he's going to start that game. Maybe he won't. We'll have to wait and see what happens. And maybe that kind of spells the end of him as an option for me if he does miss out, because we know he's going to get rotated. And I think that is the key decision for me, is how much rotation am I prepared to have from a Man City player? And I know everyone likes Bernardo Silva, but for me, the way I'm kind of going in midfield, I'd probably just rather have Gundogan, because I just think he's more of an attacking threat. The thing about Jesus is he takes up a forward spot, which at the moment seems like a good thing because we've got Jota, we've got Salah. A lot of people have got like a cheaper midfielder like Gallagher, Arsenal midfielder, Smith Rowe, Saka, whoever it might be. Some people are still holding on to Rafinha, of course. We've got Bowen coming up soon as well. Maybe Man United midfielders, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I feel like unless you want to go for like Gundogan or Bernardo Silva, maybe Foden when he's back fit, that maybe taking up that Man City spot in the forward line is possibly a little bit better just because of the way to structure your squad. And I do think if he got like 4 or 5 in the next 6, if you know, with a bit of rotation, if you've got a decent bench, he could be a good option. The only downside with him is like his numbers are always good. His expected goals, expected assists combined are pretty decent. You're looking like 0.63 expected goal amount, which is quite nice per 90 minutes, especially when he does play. He does tend to get kind of close to that 90-minute mark. If I just bring it up here, I think he does anyway. Yeah, 90, 90, 90, 86, 90, 90, etc. Right? So those numbers are pretty good. But I also had a look, and he does seem to quite often underperform his expected goals, which is to say he's maybe not the best finisher, but he always pops up in the right places, so he's always going to get chances. And he has had quite a few assists as well from that right-hand side. So it doesn't really put me off that he's listed as a forward and he's playing on the right, because this is Man City, you know. We've seen plenty of players on the left and the right, Sterling, Sané in the past, arriving at the back post, arriving late into the box. And I think Jesus has kind of got that instinct. And I think in some ways, this right-wing spot is just suiting him a little bit better. I don't know. As a forward, I always felt like he was just almost a bit too nice for the rest of his teammate. Like he didn't have that instinct to get in the box. I think that's a little bit different when he's maybe playing out wide. Maybe I'm just talking rubbish. I don't know. But I like the look of him. 8.7 million is just maybe a little bit too expensive. If he was around the 8 million mark, it might be a bit easy to fit in. So that is something to consider. I'm almost doing what he's doing on the screen there. So yeah, I like him. I don't necessarily think that he's better than a midfielder like Gundogan or Foden. Like in isolation, like, you know, weighing them up one against each other. But I do think taking a forward spot instead of a midfield spot could be decent. So he is firmly on the watch list. I don't think I can get him in for Watford away, which is a bit annoying. But I can see what happens with rotation over the Villa game, the Watford game, and then decide from there. Because again, game week 16-17, there could be some big changes. It might be a good chance to do something a little bit different. And those fixtures for Man City are excellent. So I've picked Sancho out as the player on the watch list, but realistically, this could also be Ronaldo, who we'll probably talk a little bit more about next week, although I think you know most about him, right? Fernandes and Rashford as well. The thing I like about Fernandes is we shouldn't like completely forget about him. I think his numbers from this year versus last year are quite similar, apart from the actual goals scored, and obviously penalties have come down as well. But over Christmas, if any player is going to play every single game or get close to playing every single game, then it is Fernandes, and he probably does still have penalties as well. So we shouldn't completely write him off, but he is obviously in the same bracket as Lukaku, where he's over 11 million, probably not going to be captained that often in this fixture run. So maybe it's not worth spending the money there, especially if you have to make a lot of sacrifices elsewhere. So that's all to be decided. I think Sancho and Rashford's price is a little bit easier to take because Sancho's 8.9. He's only 2.2% owned as well. I'm sure that's going to go up and up and up, especially if he does well against Arsenal. But for now, he's quite low owned, 8.9 million. Rashford's 9.4. So they're in a similar price bracket. And I do think the fixtures are worth targeting. I think it is a little bit frustrating that 3 of the 4 between game week 16 and 19 are away, but it is Norwich, Brentford, Newcastle, so there could be some decent returns there. They're all teams that I would still probably target. And I hope that with Ranić coming in, Man United will be a little bit better about taking those kind of teams apart, right? Because in the past, there has been, you know, if any of these teams try like a low block or something like that, Man United really have found it tough to break them down. So I'm hoping Ranić can turn that around. The only thing is, like even myself, I have to temper myself a little bit. He's not just going to come in and overnight completely change how Man United play and how well they do it. But Arsenal, I'm sure there'll be some influence from him, even though he's not actually managing the team yet. I'm sure he's been speaking to Carrick. Hopefully by the Palace game, he'll be in charge. And we can get a little bit of a glimpse into who's being picked, what the formation's looking like, and how the players are kind of linking up with each other. My hope is, based on some video watching, some article watching, again, not an expert on Ranić or anything like that, the Rashford and Sancho are going to have to be used, one of them at least, to kind of play closer to Ronaldo possibly, or just to at least make those runs in behind. You win the ball back, Ranić wants you to play a forward pass. Who's going to be doing the run in behind? Sancho and Rashford are probably the ones. I don't see Greenwood suddenly getting back into the team. I think Ranić will see him as a forward, possibly to play alongside Ronaldo at times, or maybe instead of. I just think Sancho and Rashford are just better players in those wide spots. So I will say, and I always say this, right? I know people say you're biased. Like, if I think there's a genuine Man United option, like Shaw at the start of the season, I'll just say it. With Sancho, there is probably a little bit of bias creeping in because he's a new signing to Man United at the start of the season. I really wanted him. It didn't happen. And now I'm thinking this could be the time. And I'm not quite sure if I think he's a genuinely great option or maybe I'm a little bit biased. So I think he's definitely a wait and see for now. See what happens against Arsenal in Game Week 14. Maybe go against Palace. If not, just give him that game. And then you've got the Norwich, Brentford and Newcastle run coming up. So I think he's looking pretty good. Differential, obviously 2 goals in 2 as well. His numbers in the Bundesliga were good. There is a Bundesliga tax, if you want to call it that, right? We know from the pre-season video that numbers fall down a little bit, but not enough to suddenly make a player a bad option. So I think he's got goals in his locker. I think the crosses from the right to Ronaldo are pretty decent as well. So there's assist threat too. But it's not a case that I'm locked into Sancho because I think Rashford could be an option. We know he can score goals. We know he's great at running in behind. He could be the one to partner Ronaldo depending on the formation. So got my eye on these two. I just think they're possibly better value than Fernandes or Ronaldo. But who knows? Let's watch Arsenal. Let's watch Palace and then we can decide. Could it be time for Chris Wood? Like, I'm being kind of serious here, right? If you think about it, around that price, if I mention Tony again, people just moan, right? Tony's rubbish, Brentford are rubbish, and Bomo, Tony, they're no good. Why'd you keep going on about them? Even though they've got Leeds away, Watford at home coming up. And obviously, Tony's nailed, and he's played 90 minutes, and he's on penalties. But let's just forget about that for a second. Like, he could be an option. And then you've got Pukki, King, but like Pukki... he's got, I think it's Spurs, then Man United, and then Villa. So fixtures aren't ideal. King's obviously still got to play a tough fixture as well, though he is good over Christmas. And they are cheaper. That is definitely worth considering. But there's a bit more money to spend. And Chris Wood's pretty nailed. Also, mostly plays to 90 minutes, not all the time. So against Crystal Palace, he came off in the 79th minute, 60th minute against Chelsea, although that was Chelsea. A lot of the times he gets 80 minutes plus, so pretty decent. His numbers are usually pretty good. They're not looking great so far this year, 0.33 non-penalty expected goals per 90 minutes, but usually his baseline's a little bit higher, so I would hope that that would go up as well. And he's got to play Newcastle away, Watford at home in the next 3. Fixtures after that aren't too bad, Villa away and Everton at home. So for a nailed striker at a time when there's not really too many options, he could be a genuine option as well, especially with the penalties. Now, I'm not saying you have to rush out and buy him, and let's see how he does against Wolves away and stuff like that first. But we know Newcastle are poor in defence. We know Watford are leaking goals as well. And they've got quite a few injuries too. So I think 2 of the next 3 are pretty good. And the fixtures after that are okay as well. And it's not that I think he's just this standout, brilliant option. I just think there's not that many forward options. And realistically, if you're spending around the 6 million mark, look, we saw last night, Benteke got rotated. That was a worry that I had. Edouard come back in. If I go for Edouard, he might get rested as well. And then Benteke comes back in. So I'm completely ignoring Palace forwards. I could go for Tony, but I think for around the same price, Chris Wood has got to be worth a look in as well. Right now, I'd probably still go for Tony, I think, just because it's Leeds away, Watford at home in the next 2. But looking at the next set of 5 fixtures for Wood, they're pretty decent. So he is on the watch list. I want to see how he does against Wolves, how many minutes he gets. I know people like Cornet, but I think I'd rather go for Chris Wood. And to be honest, part of that is a bit like Gabriel Jesus. I think I'd rather take up a forward spot with a Burnley player right now than a midfield spot because there's other midfielders that I want. So Chris Wood is on the watch list, and I'm being serious. 1.3% owned. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. There we go. Let me know what you think about those players mentioned. Chris Wood, Lukaku, Sancho, etc. What do you think about them? Let me know in the comments below. Give it a like if you enjoyed it as well. Hit that subscribe button if you're new. Like I said, I'm going to do the rest of the videos, transfer tips, team selection, game week preview / final thoughts. I'll probably mix those 2 together again over the next couple of days. So I think it's important to get tonight's matches out of the way. Otherwise, we've only had 2 played. So a watch list is easy to do because I'm thinking about players. It doesn't necessarily matter if they score well. It's more about how they play and what position they play and stuff like that over the next kind of, the rest of game week 14 and 15 going into game week 16, etc. So watch this is good. The rest of it I'm going to wait until tomorrow onwards. So team selection, transfer tips, game week preview, deadline stream, all coming over the next couple of days. So give it a like if you enjoyed it, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.